Yes, he did. Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9PBS.
As they sing in the Broadway musical here, Let the Sun Shine In. Alvin Reid sitting in for Charlie Brennan today on Donnybrook. And, of course, Wendy Wiese is here from KTRS. Sitting in for Bill McClellan is Joe Holleman of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. Our lone founder today is Ray Hartmann from A Raw Story. Sorry, wait. Correct me. Substack. I'm sorry.
It's all
All right. And
let's move on.
Sarah Fenske is me. From the Riverfront Times, and she's in charge of about 3 papers. But none of them probably didn't have as bad as news as we did on Father's Day. We awoke to a mass shooting that left 1 teenager dead in an office building on Washington Avenue. Details of how the teenagers got in and what all was going on are still coming out. But it's almost like you can't say we're shocked anymore, although this one was rather shocking.
Especially Father's Day. Father's Day weekend, I think. And the impact of these children, I mean, because they're getting younger and younger. It seems that they're getting younger and younger. And they're in such a hurry to grow up. And all teenagers are always in a hurry to grow up, but the consequences of this and just to resolve any issue with a gun, these are just generations that are going to be lost if we can't get this situation in hand. And when you think about the fact that the doors were propped open, somebody has to be held accountable. There has to be some kind of system or some system that is in place where if you have kids in, that congregate, or really any group that congregates in a building, you have to have security. And I don't know where that security was.
Yeah, I mean, there's been so many times where, there's been one of these incidents downtown and we're saying, oh, if we just had more of a police presence. I don't know that any police presence in the world could stop something at this private office building. But you have to really question the security in this building. I mean, it's very unusual that something would be so easy to get into that teens are in there for what looked like a significant period of time, causing a lot of damage. And they'd advertise this party ahead, on direct messages on social media. They knew they were going to be able to get in there. And I think this property owner could be in some trouble legally.
I think there's a variety of, everybody wants to point their finger at one other thing, and I think we can just point a whole bunch of fingers, period. First of all, and I know we've had some disagreement around here is about who's responsible for raising kids. There's 14 and 15-year-olds down there at 1 o'clock and 1:30. At some point, a parent has to be there. And once a person's an adult and not subject to curfew, I get it. And teenagers also will make knuckle-headed decisions. I did. I mean, there's no doubt about it. So there has to be, I believe, an increased police presence. There has to be better security at these buildings. There has to be legislation that limits some of these short-term B&B type rentals where you can basically just throw a party somewhere, anywhere. There's a whole variety of fingers we could point, and they all are deservedly being pointed in those directions. I do think one kind of fallout about it was, and I know it was discussed on this show a bit, but Alderwoman Kara Spencer introduced a bill about handguns or carrying guns, open carry. And her political opponents were really quick to kind of slam that bill. All of a sudden, after this incident on Father's Day, they're kind of quieted down a little bit, and it does seem to be at least proceeding through the process of getting worked on, clear up some language. But I think there's a whole new approach now when people wanted to just say, well, that's a bad idea, that won't help anything. Now at least they're saying, well, maybe we need to do something as opposed to just blame it on Jeff City, blame it here, blame it there. Do what you can do and encourage everybody else to do what they can.
And I think the one thing everyone has in common is none of us has the answer, and there isn't the answer. And in a strange way, it could be something that can cross the political divide, because yes, guns are needed, but more police are needed. I absolutely agree. I hate to do that to you. With the short-term rentals are a huge problem, but this wasn't a short-term rental. But it's an example where anyone that thinks their side or their point of view, is a quick fix. This is just unacceptable, and it should be unacceptable for everybody. And reasonable people can disagree on parts of it, but this is a big thing we have to deal with across kind of party lines.
Is it a coincidence that it happened on Washington Avenue?
I don't think so.
I see, because I don't, but I can't. This is one of those, I'm just talking like maybe theoretically, but, I just don't get how Washington Avenue. So what's up with Washington?
So promising at one time.
Avenue.
Washington, it's. I don't say it's a coincidence, but it could. I mean, there are other places in the city, really anywhere, that something like this could happen. So I think that we should not give up, for example, and I'm not saying you're saying this, but we shouldn't give up on Washington Avenue, but I think we've got to recognize this is really becoming a crisis. I mean, it isn't just a problem.
We're there.
Yeah.
We're there.
And I think in terms of the Washington Avenue question is it has this perception as being like the party place. You get people coming from the county, coming from across the river, teens, all coming down to this place that doesn't actually really have much for teens to do. If you're 21, of course, there's some great options on Wash Ave. I love to hang out there. But, when the mayor extended the hours at some of these recreation centers, I heard some guffaws among people who are not fans of hers. I think that was wrong to guffaw at, because I think part of the problem here is there's not really a place for teens to congregate in the way that back in the day, we used to all hang out at the mall for hours on end. There's nothing like that anymore.
Well, but I think when given their druthers, a place like Washington Avenue or a rec center,
Oh, I get it.
Right.
But at least give an option for the kids who don't want to get into this situation.
Yeah.
I'm all for the options. I agree on that. What I don't like to see is when people will go, well, that should solve the problem. Open up those community centers.
Right.
No, that's one little piece.
But I don't think anybody said that.
No, but the idea is it gets presented as being this, we have to expand the community center hours like, okay, yes, but what about 6 other things you should mention? And if anybody thinks that's going to be some panacea that's going to solve any problems, because, I mean, I was trying to explain, and I believe it was maybe on Wendy, on your radio show with Jennifer Blum. I said, there's always going to be, there's a group of teenagers who are not sitting around going, well, I can either go to shoot some hoops
I go to malt shop,
go smoke some weed, do blunts, and shoot guns. There's always going to be the knuckleheads who are going to make that bad choice.
That's right.
It doesn't matter how many programs you have. So, great. Open up community centers. Give those kids who might be sucked into it or accidentally taken in by it, but also be aware that there's also those folks who are always going to make the bad choices. And you have to enforce the law on those people.
And
so
this is hard.
Do it all. Do it all.
Some of this, like what you said, is a little hard to relate to. And for example, somebody like me, when I was a teen, malls hadn't been invented.
Were there general stores?
I think there were. We didn't
I remember malls.
There was that.
Wow.
I know. They were just starting up.
Pretty much.
Northwest Plaza was.
Right. We had to check our guns at the barn door.
There was Northwest Plaza.
In all seriousness, just as we were getting together, for the show, there was a press conference. Mike McMillan from the Urban League, the mayor was going to be there, some other officials. I don't know what the announcement was because we were here. So maybe some other things are discussed other than, but I can't be mad for, expanding the hours, for the community centers and all that. You have to do something. Okay. The family of Janie Edmondson has sued the city of St. Louis in connection with the accident that cost her both of her legs being amputated. And I'll turn to you, Joe. I mean, obviously, Kim Gardner was involved. Obviously, the city was involved. Obviously, even though the 22nd Circuit Court was involved. But if something happens to you in a city under any circumstance like this, can you win a lawsuit against the city? Or is this one that this family could win because of the details about what happened.
Well, and win is one of those fuzzy words
Good,
here.
yeah, that's a good point, Joe.
Because it's not a criminal trial where guilty or not guilty. This is levels of liability. First of all, I think it's nobody's surprised that a lawsuit was filed. This was beyond tragic, because you know that word gets used way too many times, possibly overused. This was an absolute worst case scenario for their family, to say the very least, for the city, for city officials. It just couldn't have been any worse. And the idea that they're filing suit, it doesn't surprise me one bit. My guess, and I'm wrong as often as I'm right, but this never goes to trial. There's a settlement that gets made here. And it's one thing to say, well, somebody's going and they're going to argue. Nobody wants that young lady to take a stand or have to take the stand and describe what happened to her. My guess is this will get settled. The city will want to settle it. Everybody involved in this will want this to go away as fast as possible. And what I hope happens is that there is some remuneration for this young lady that will do some small part to alleviate the burden she's going to have to bear for the rest of her life. So in a sense, I guess, I'm hoping she wins in the general sense of that term, but I don't think we're going to be seeing some trial where there's some decision made. I don't think it ever gets that far.
Agreed.
Well, I agree with that. I will say the worst case would have been if she had died, and I know a lot of people. I know you're not suggesting the contrary. A lot of have the privilege of knowing a lot of people with disabilities who have gone on to have just the best of life, and she sure seems like somebody we all wish the best for. And I wouldn't, I think she'll have a great life ahead of her. But the irony is that when you have a liability situation, oftentimes your damages are greater if you are alive than in a case where it's wrongful death. I think that the city I agree with you that it'll be settled, partly because the city's liability has nothing to do with all the things we were talking about, understandably, about whether this person should be incarcerated. That's not, he wasn't, he just should have been at home. That isn't, what the city could be liable for, I think, and we're not lawyers here, is having an unsafe intersection. That would be their liability, I'm pretty sure. And I agree with you, she's certainly entitled to damages, and a question, to the extent she can prove there was negligence effectively because of the way those did. And I think we should remember, without minimizing anything, this could have happened anywhere. This is all the things we talk about as a city problem or a downtown problem, or this really is a horrible thing that could have happened anywhere with a reckless driver.
But it didn't.
Well, no, I understand.
And with the mismanagement that was going on in that office, the odds of it happening
That's
here
exactly right.
were greater than in some other places.
That's not
That's
part
exactly
of this
right.
case, is my point. I think it's part of.
I don't think there's ever going to be a case.
Yeah,
But I mean,
it's a legitimate part of the political discussion. I'm not saying it isn't.
No, but wait a minute.
But
If
it's not.
you're saying that family's attorneys won't bring all that up if it went to trial?
I don't think
they're going to bring that up.
I would think that they would bring it up, but I do not think that an argument about the fact that this person shouldn't have been driving is going to make.
Oh, it's going to come up. I mean, when Joe's talking about it,
politically it will, but not legally.
Where you get to the number on a settlement is, you're arguing back and forth on, like, can we bring this in, and how strong is this case, and how damaging is this testimony? They're going to be fighting over every detail that led up to this moment.
If this were a DWI case and somebody had prior DWIs, I could see possibly. But just because the person, he wasn't being locked up for driving offenses.
It was the rudderless ship of chaos.
Yeah, but that's not going to. That's not going to play.
I think it does.
That's not. I mean, we can talk about politically, but that's not going to play.
That's why the city is going to settle, not because it was a bad intersection.
No, I
the
think
city is going to settle because all of this other stuff is going to come out.
We'll disagree.
All right, okay, because I honestly think the city could could beat a bad intersection.
The city is going to settle because they don't want this discussion and all of these things coming up while the young lady who lost both her legs is sitting there.
I get
That's why none of this happens.
Well, we're talking about it because of those things. I'm not saying it's not relevant to the discussion. I do not think it affects the liability there. Well, none of us are right.
More lawsuit news. Heather Taylor, former St. Louis police officer, sued. I guess she said she got canned because she was a whistleblower. She won $300,000, or they settled on giving her $300,000. But now the city wants to claw it back because she did not, as they allege, turn over vital information that would have been used, I guess, in her hearing. Ray, fair fight, or just let that one alone? First of all, I'm a little biased because Heather Taylor, I think, is not only a 20-year officer, but really a civic leader here in terms of her role in ESOP and some of the things. So I have that bias, but I think this is outrageous on the part of the city councilor and the city. First of all, we're not going to get into the legal issues of what they met the disclosure requirements and stuff. The bottom line is the city is under no obligation to go after Heather Taylor. It reminds me exactly when the city councilor, who is Sheena Hamilton, first came in. They went way beyond what they had to do to try to appeal on behalf of qualified immunity, which is something most of us despise, the case with the kettling. It's one thing, you understand, the city councilor... Let's stick to what we're talking about.
No, it's the same thing. Is the city councilor has an obligation to defend police officers when they're accused of stuff. They do not have an obligation, for example, to appeal if they lose. They don't have an obligation to make a cause out of this, and Heather Taylor won her case. If they want, I guess they could appeal the amount, but the idea that they would go back after Heather Taylor is mean-spirited, and it really raises the question: whose side are you on? I mean, she was discriminated against racially, and essentially this is like throwing down for the people discriminating.
So this was a story in the Riverfront Times.
And it was a very good story.
I thought Ryan Kroll did a great job with this story.
He did.
And I do want to say she was not fired; she was just retaliated against. She did retire in good standing with the department. But what's interesting here is she came back. Tashara Jones hired her to be high up in the Department of Public Safety, and so now you have one appointee of Mayor Jones, where a different appointee of Mayor Jones, the city councilor, is now going after this. It's an interesting tension that I'm not sure what that must be like in the hallway.
But isn't that the way things should be, technically?
Well, listen, I'm wondering, does it happen to be that when Heather Taylor was fighting for raises for the police up in Jefferson City, that put her on the opposite side of Tashara Jones, as I recall. So, I mean, the great thing is that, when people talk about, they say tomorrow is a long time and nobody has permanent allies, only permanent interests.
Bill Clay.
Yeah.
Things have changed. Edmund Burke actually said back in 1600 England, but
well, she is still in this position working for the mayor, and I think it has led to some tension. And what has come out?
There's varying degrees of allyship, I guess, of alliance.
For sure. But now they have these 400 different audio recordings that they found out that she had, and they found out that she had them because she provided this to a different officer who's suing the city, and I have to think they're mad about that.
Well, they are, but
supporting this officer.
There's a couple points of irony. One is she was A, discriminated against or found, and B, retaliated against, and now they're retaliating her against her now in the legal system. But the other bit of irony is, I think his officer's Green, was it? An African-American who was shot by a police officer. That's the case they're talking about. And she happened, I think, if I understand correctly, she had a tape that she happened to be friends, I think, with this officer. She came across an ESOP meeting that she had taped, and they asked, the city actually in that case should have been more aggressive in finding tapes like this, and she just happened to give this one, and that triggered this whole case. And that's a case where the city looks really bad on that officer being shot, but I just think it really is just unnecessary. There's no reason to be going after Heather Taylor.
All right. 350 people show up at a meeting. St. Charles Library is the topic, and how a man is dressing, I guess, as a lady who works in the library. Sarah, I mean, I wish 350 people would come to the library and check a book out, but it seems like controversy is what you need to get people down there.
Yeah, I mean, what a tempest in a teacup in St. Charles at this point, that you have hundreds of people turning out because they're so upset that this library employee apparently has a goatee, but was also wearing some makeup and had fingernail polish on. And this mother is so upset that she's now gotten this whole community all wound up about this. You know, what will happen to the children if they happen to see this? I can tell you, as somebody who grew up in a community where I had some library workers who dressed quite like this, the children are going to turn out just fine. The important thing is whether they have access to good books that can open their minds. It's crazy to think how much energy is going into this situation and what this particular librarian chose to wear.
Well, and the mother who it was, I felt like I was watching performance art, because she was dressed like, at least on stltoday.com, she was dressed in the same way.
So she went to a library board meeting and she said, I want to show you what this librarian was wearing. And so she had like a fake goatee and was wearing like a corset over a striped t-shirt. It was just bizarre.
It was really bizarre, but it's turned her into a performance artist.
It's her 15 minutes of fame right there.
Yeah, and you know, I guess the lesson is, if you feel that strongly about dress codes, then have a dress code.
And that's the thing, I don't even know that the St. Charles Library Board could outlaw this. There's a Missouri Supreme Court precedent from 2019 that says that you can't discriminate against somebody for not dressing in the way that would be associated stereotypically with their gender. Missouri Supreme Court, people were very surprised by this case, but a library board cannot then make a policy saying, hey, men, you gotta dress manly. Women, you can't wear pants. You can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I have a unique position on it. I don't care.
You would not fit in St. Charles.
You know, then just, I don't fit in a lot of places. I don't fit in a lot of places. I want to be able to go to my library. I want to be able to get my books. If there's somebody there who I think is dressed, I mean, as long as they're not public indecency,
sure.
I just don't care. You know, just go in, get your books, go home. I mean, that's what I want from my library. You want to make a statement with your wardrobe? Stay away. You want to make a statement with, you know, whatever? Stay away. Let me get my books. Let me check them out. Let me go home. And a lot of this culture war stuff, it seems to me, and not just this case, but it seems one side trying to provoke the other, whatever side you want to start with, to see if someone will bite, and then when you bite, you accuse them of being guilty of some ism, and then the other side accuses you of being guilty of some ism, and then we do some hot takes on Twitter, and everybody gets all excited, and then 48 hours, 72 hours later, we find another thing to get all riled up about.
All right, we got to move on. Okay, Joe, the Missouri Supreme Court said our Attorney General was guilty of stupidism.
Wendy. That was your quote, right?
Stupidism. Okay, he was standing in the way of the initiative drive that could lead until us voting on abortion rights. And the Supreme Court said, you know, what are you doing, guy? But in the meantime, isn't that good for his campaign?
You know, I don't.
He's running,
he's running for Attorney General again. I mean, I always used to think losing lawsuits was bad, but Eric Schmidt has proven that's not necessarily the case. So, I mean, I have a problem with attorney generals who don't seem to get the law right. Whatever side it's on. I mean, especially when you have judges, especially this last one was just like, what are you, nuts? Was kind of their ruling. Stupidism.
Nutsism.
You know, it wasn't like a fine judicial line here. It was like, no, you can't do that. And next case. So, yeah, I mean, I would think it would hurt him. But then, as people have pointed out, Eric Schmidt lost lawsuits and won. But I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, to me,
I don't know.
It's very hard to believe that this is going to hurt him with the voters. I think they're looking for somebody to take a bold stance to try to stop abortion, and whether or not it's a stupid stance or a stance that has any chance to succeed in court, it just doesn't seem to be the mood of the Missouri electorate.
I don't think you sway any votes with it, though. I think your people are already with you.
First of all, you got to keep this in some political perspective, and that is Andrew Bailey has a very serious challenger to his right politically. So his calculation when it comes to politics isn't the rest of us. It's the Republicans fighting for the MAGA base. And so he's got to be looking at that. That's his calculation. And the Republicans' calculation is they are very worried about abortion. And I guess, I don't know if Parson can decide whether it's on the August ballot or November, which is an interesting call. But if the pro-choice side gets an abortion measure on the ballot, that is not good for the Republicans. They're not happy about it. It'll turn out a lot more people that are not on their side to the ballot box. And so it's kind of and I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. I'm just saying it's a lot more nuanced politically. And it's an interesting thing to follow.
It was this time last year that they had decided to put it on the ballot in Kansas in August for that very thought, because the general was coming up, the midterm, and it still passed.
How'd that work out?
Yeah, so you know how
it's the same issue.
I think it's the same issue, and I could see where those people, some people might not want it on the ballot because of those reasons. So. No letters today, but you can send one to Donnybrook, care of 9 PBS, 3655 Olive Street, St. Louis, Missouri, 63108. Send us an email to donnybrook@9pbs.org or a tweet to #DonnybrookSTL. Call us at the Donnybrook comment line, 314-512-9094. And you can listen to us at your favorite podcast site, Donnybrook Podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, and Tune In. The kids are off school, vacations are booked, and the lines at Ted Drew's are longer than ever. It's officially summer in St. Louis. Here at Donnybrook, we'll also be shifting to our summer schedule for the next few months. We'll still be here live with you every Thursday at 7 p.m., but next up, we'll be taking a summer hiatus. So at 7:30, you'll see some of our favorite episodes from the past year. Keep an eye on your schedule to see what we've got planned for you this fall. But for now, enjoy your summer, and we'll see you Thursdays at 7. I want to thank Sarah Fenske and Joe Holleman for sitting in, and I'll be back in this chair again next week. So I look forward to seeing you then. In the meantime, stay cool this weekend because it's going to be hot. Thanks so much. Everybody have a great weekend and hopefully a safe weekend. Good night.
Donnybrook is made possible by the support of the Betsy and Thomas Patterson Foundation and the members of 9 PBS.